This is the story of Khamzat Chimaev, a UFC fighter who once proudly represented Sweden. He repeatedly spoke of this country with love and called it his home. But over time, everything changed. Khamzat suddenly reconnected with his roots. After his first successes in the UFC, he quickly established a connection with Chechnya's president and a notoriously ruthless dictator, Ramzan Kadyrov. They became sparring partners, best friends, and practically brothers. But even this phase wouldn't last long. Not long after, he crashed a car that Ramzan Kadyrov had gifted him. He unfollowed him on Instagram and deleted all their photos together. And eventually, he even renounced his Russian passport in favor of a UAE one. This is a dark story about Khamzat Chimaev, his betrayal, his questionable connections, and the slippery path he chose for himself. Khamzat Chimaev was born on May 1, 1994, in the village of Gvardeyskoye in the Nadarekny district of the Chechen Republic, right at the beginning of the First Chechen War. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, Chechnya declared its independence. This enraged Russia, which considered Chechnya a strategically important region. The republic housed a valuable oil refinery, and major pipelines carrying resources to the west ran through it. Controlling these resources meant holding significant power. On top of that, dangerous radical groups had taken control, posing a major security threat. This led to a brutal war, with Russia seeking to regain control over the region. For many years, the country was in chaos. Crime was rampant, cities were reduced to ruins due to endless wars and conflicts. People lived in fear and uncertainty. In 2003, Russia finally managed to reclaim Chechnya, but the region remained impoverished and devastated. Years of war had left deep scars. As a result, many people began to emigrate in search of a better and safer life. Khamzat Chimaev and his family were among them. His older brother, Artur, was the first to move to Sweden. In 2013, he managed to bring the rest of the family over. The two Chechen Wars had a huge impact on Chechen migration to Europe. After the Second Chechen War, many European countries took in refugees, providing housing, education, medical care, and other support to help them integrate into society. Without specialized education, Khamzat had to work various jobs, at a factory, in social services, and even as a nightclub bouncer. Notably, Khamzat had been wrestling since childhood, competing in Chechen championships within his age group. After moving to Sweden, he didn't quit the sport. He kept improving in freestyle wrestling and even won the national championship. However, without Swedish citizenship, he couldn't compete internationally for Sweden. Later, Chimaev switched to MMA, even though his older brother urged him to stay in a stable job. After a trip to Stockholm, he joined the renowned All-Stars gym, where he trained with Alexander Gustafsson and Reza Madadi. They helped him not just with training, but also with everyday life. Chimaev was allowed to live at the gym, and his coaches and teammates treated him with great care and respect, doing everything they could to help him succeed. In Sweden, Chimaev first fought as an amateur before making his professional debut. He demolished one opponent after another, giving them no chance. After 5 spectacular wins, he caught the attention of the UFC. Around this time, a key moment changed the course of his career. On June 1st, 2019, UFC Fight Night took place in Stockholm, where Alexander Gustafsson faced Anthony Smith in the main event. At the post-fight press conference, Gustafsson praised Khamzat Chimaev, expressing high hopes for him. In later interviews, Gustafsson repeatedly reiterated his belief in Chimaev, promoting his name in the media. He vouched for Khamzat, predicting he would become a future champion and an MMA superstar. After his 6th dominant professional win, and with Gustafsson constantly mentioning him, the UFC finally signed the Chechen fighter. This marked the beginning of a new chapter in Khamzat Chimaev's life. As you know, in the UFC, Khamzat started his journey by destroying everyone in his path. He even set 2 new UFC records, winning 2 fights in 10 days and 3 fights in 66 days. Thus, moving to Sweden helped Chimaev establish himself as an athlete. He always spoke positively about Sweden and considered it his home. He even admitted that he wanted to bring a major UFC event to Sweden. But after his initial success in the promotion, Chimaev entered the most controversial period of his career, or perhaps the most successful, depending on how you look at it. After one of his fights, Khamzat Chimaev went live on Instagram with the president of Chechnya, Ramzan Kadyrov. In hindsight, it would have been better if that had never happened. Ramzan Kadyrov is the head of the Chechen Republic, a close ally of Putin, and a ruthless dictator with an insatiable hunger for attention. His massive army is currently fighting in Ukraine, while he flaunts luxury brands like Balenciaga and Prada. He owns extravagant mansions and flies on a private jet, while Chechnya remains one of Russia's poorest and least developed regions. Any criticism directed at him is met with threats and insults. Recently, he was bragging about a gift he supposedly received from Elon Musk, a Tesla Cybertruck with a machine gun mounted on it. However, Musk quickly denied ever giving him anything, calling it a lie. Kadyrov also has a passion for sports, and especially combat sports. He owns an MMA promotion, an MMA gym, and a football team, all named Akhmat in honor of his father. But he didn't stop there. His favorite hobby and form of entertainment is sponsoring and supporting famous athletes. Kadyrov funds, promotes, and protects them. The moment someone achieves success in sports, Kadyrov is right there. The ideal scenario is if the athlete is Chechen, or at least has Chechen roots. In return for his powerful support and financial rewards, athletes begin praising the Chechen leader, boosting his ego and image. The start of Khamzat's relationship with Ramzan Kadyrov can be seen as a natural progression, a rising Chechen athlete forming an alliance with the leader of the Chechen Republic, seemingly nothing out of the ordinary. But behind all of this lies a little-known story, shared on YouTube by Tumso Abdurakhmanov. Tumso is a Chechen political activist and one of Kadyrov's most vocal critics. In 2021, he was granted political asylum in Sweden. According to him, Chimaev and his brothers were closely connected with another Chechen living in Sweden, Kana Afanasyev. Kana and his family in Chechnya faced pressure and threats from Ramzan Kadyrov. One day, when Kadyrov's men started beating Kana's father, he stepped in to defend him. That act was considered defiance. Fearing for his life, Kana had no choice but to flee to Sweden and seek asylum there. After spending some time in Sweden, his asylum request was denied, with authorities claiming he was not in danger back in Chechnya. He was deported, and shortly after, found dead. His body showed clear signs of torture and electric shock. Soon after, his family was forced to leave their home village. Rumor has it that Kana was close to the Chimaev family. Disappearances and mysterious deaths are common in Chechnya. People vanish without a trace, and according to rumors, it always happens on Ramzan Kadyrov's orders. But despite all this, in January 2021, Khamzat flew to Chechnya to meet with Ramzan Kadyrov. As a gesture of goodwill, Kadyrov gifted him a brand new Mercedes-Benz GLE, just another routine display of generosity from the Chechen leader. Not long after, Khamzat crashed the car, but that wasn't a big deal. Ramzan greatly admired Khamzat's success, and their friendship only grew stronger. There are countless YouTube videos of their sparring sessions where Khamzat goes out of his way to make Kadyrov look like a skilled and dominant fighter, and he wasn't the only one. Every fighter who trains with Ramzan is expected to lose. There's simply no other option. Kadyrov and Chimaev spent a lot of time together. To outsiders, it seemed like their friendship would last forever. But Ramzan Kadyrov wasn't the only one who beat Khamzat Chimaev. His sons joined in too. Khamzat was punched, choked, and beaten. Yet, he continued posting photos with Kadyrov's sons, calling them his brothers. But the one he had the strongest bond with was the youngest, Adam. Adam himself is a boxer and an MMA fighter, despite his young age. In 2021, 13-year-old Adam Kadyrov had a rather unusual boxing match against his peer, Aslan Bedyrov. Adam was clearly losing, taking more and more blows to the head as the fight went on. Then, out of nowhere, the referee jumped in and started counting a knockdown, but he ruled it against Adam's opponent instead of Kadyrov's son. Moments later, Aslan's corner threw in the towel, signaling surrender. And just like that, Adam walked away with a highly controversial victory. From that point on, Adam's career only went up. He received every possible award from every government institution. Even Putin himself kept a close eye on his combat training. Khamzat also showered Adam with attention, for one simple reason. Everyone around him believed Adam would one day succeed Ramzan as the next leader of Chechnya. That's why he was getting so much special treatment. During one of his live broadcasts, Ramzan called Khabib Nurmagomedov a UFC project and tried to downplay the Dagestani champion's achievements. Then, out of nowhere, Khamzat Chimaev appeared in the comments and wrote, "We'll tear him apart too if he wants." That one message made it clear. Khamzat was now Ramzan's #1 favorite, completely devoted to his master. But all these public displays of loyalty and his constant flirtation with Kadyrov didn't sit well in the West. It's important to remember that, at the time, Khamzat still didn't have Swedish citizenship. He was still a citizen of the Russian Federation. To understand the growing pressure, just watch Khamzat's interview with the Swedish outlet Expressen. How would you describe your relationship with Ramzan Kadyrov? He's the leader of my homeland. Sweden has a king, right? If the king invites me to dinner, I'll go. I show respect to the king. So when Ramzan invites me to dinner, I have dinner with him. Kadyrov has also been accused of human rights violations and having close ties to Putin. I'm an athlete. Do you want to cancel the interview? In short, Khamzat was a regular guest at Ramzan's residence, training his children, flying on his private jet. Everything seemed fine. But then, in February 2022, Russia declared war on Ukraine and launched a full-scale invasion of its neighbor. Chechen forces played an active role in the war, gaining infamy for killing civilians, looting, and committing atrocities that many labeled as genocide. In response, Western nations imposed sanctions on Ramzan Kadyrov and his entire family. He was banned from entering Europe and the US. His European assets were frozen, and Western companies were prohibited from doing business with any Kadyrov-linked enterprises. Even his Instagram account was permanently deleted. As soon as the news broke, Khamzat rushed to clean up his Instagram account. He unfollowed nearly everyone, including Ramzan, and deleted all of his posts, wiping out any trace of his pictures with Kadyrov and his sons. Clearly, this terrified him. Friendship is one thing, but his career and ability to compete in the UFC were far more important. At that point, it seemed like everything was settled. The fear of sanctions and his career ambitions should have been Khamzat's main priorities, but no one was ready for what happened next. At UFC 294, Khamzat Chimaev's hypocrisy hit its peak. After defeating Kamaru Usman, he shared his thoughts in 2 languages. In English, he said no child should die anywhere and called for peace.
Muslim, Christian, Jewish, doesn't matter. Please, guys, be together. Let us live in this world.
But in Chechen, he said the exact opposite, speaking directly to Ramzan Kadyrov. I beg you, for the sake of Allah, give me a weapon so I can go to Palestine. I swear I was not born to fight here in shorts. Chechens know what kind of heart we have inside. If the Padishah allows it, I am ready to go and die. I am not afraid to die for our Muslim brothers. And here's the question. What stopped him from saying the same thing in English? Why was his message in the 2 languages so drastically different? What peace and love was he talking about when, at that very moment, Ramzan Kadyrov was meeting with Ukrainian prisoners of war? During that meeting, Kadyrov stated that he intended to use the prisoners as human shields, and even handed one of them a gun, suggesting he shoot himself. In the end, Khamzat never went to war. His statement about fighting in Palestine served an entirely different purpose. Ramzan Kadyrov was deeply invested in the situation in Palestine. He even asked Putin for permission to send Chechen troops there. This was a fresh and highly relevant topic, and Khamzat saw an opportunity. He capitalized on it, demonstrating his unwavering loyalty to the Chechen dictator. He wasn't the only fighter to make such a statement at the time. Another Russian fighter, Maga Ismailov, also publicly declared his desire to go and defend Palestine. Tickets were even arranged for him, but in the end, Maga didn't dare to go. Meanwhile, when Khamzat arrived in Chechnya, he was welcomed as a national hero. Kadyrov greatly valued Chimaev, and as a reward for his loyalty and respect, he gifted him a brand new Mercedes. Russian media have repeatedly reported that, beyond luxury cars, Kadyrov also gifted Chimaev expensive real estate. The close relationship between Ramzan and Khamzat wouldn't end there. Ramzan would give him a special assignment. Kadyrov would send Khamzat to Europe to connect with other Chechen fighters. There, he would be seen alongside many MMA fighters of Chechen origin. Khamzat's main goal in this endeavor would be to recruit fighters, turning them into so-called Kadyrovites, obedient servants, just as he had once become. In the end, these fighters would start wrapping themselves in Kadyrov's flag, glorifying him everywhere, and eventually carrying out further recruitment around the world. Where this would all lead remained unknown, but the process had begun, and it was already irreversible. At that time, Large-scale public Quran burnings were happening in Sweden. The government did nothing in response. Muslims living in Sweden were outraged and bewildered. On his Instagram, Khamzat posted, "I am a Muslim, but I have never been against other religions, and I have never allowed myself to do what they do to other religions." This was Khamzat's reaction to the burning of the Quran by the leader of the Danish party, Stram Kurs, Rasmus Paludan. Considering his past major conflicts with Sweden, Khamzat decided to renounce his Swedish citizenship. By that time, he was on the verge of officially receiving it. During this period, Khamzat began spending more time in Chechnya, including training with Kadyrov's team. He reconnected with his first coaches and, overall, no longer needed Sweden or its support. And logically, it seemed like a natural progression. Khamzat, unhappy with Sweden's policies, should have simply kept his Russian passport and returned to his homeland, especially considering that there he was idolized and treated like a hero. But instead, Chimaev took a different route. He moved to the UAE. He said he preferred the climate there, had relocated his team, and asked people not to take it personally. He loved all countries, but he felt more comfortable living in Dubai. He said the following, "I make decisions based on the interests of my career and my family. That comes first for me." It's unclear how Ramzan Kadyrov felt about this after so many years of friendship, but knowing Khamzat's talent for pleasing and praising him, he surely found the right words to assure him that this was a good decision. Many people might say that this was a calculated move to avoid sanctions and continue competing in the UFC. But on the other hand, there are plenty of fighters who compete under the Russian flag without any harm to their careers. For example, fighter Magomed Ankalaev trains at the Akhmat gym and receives gifts from Ramzan, yet he has had no visa issues with the US. Fighters like Cejudo, Garbrandt, and Gaethje have no trouble traveling to Chechnya at the invitation of the Chechen president, receiving gifts there and returning home. But unlike Kadyrov, Sweden didn't just turn a blind eye to this situation. According to multiple reports, UFC fighter Khamzat Chimaev faces trial and a heavy fine for his decision to compete at UFC 294 under the UAE flag. Sweden Aliens reports, "The fact is that the fighter has long enjoyed benefits and received financial assistance for training and full-fledged fight camps. The country's government considers this act disrespectful and ungrateful on the part of Khamzat Chimaev." This is the story of Khamzat Chimaev, a man whose actions suggest he has no real principles or moral compass. His decisions show that nothing matters to him except his personal well-being, and his main quality in life isn't his ability to fight and beat opponents, but his talent for quickly adapting to situations and finding the best opportunities for himself. Undoubtedly, Khamzat could be called the most two-faced and selfish fighter to ever compete in the UFC. We'll see what happens in the future. Maybe he'll come to his senses and choose the right path. Who knows?